Have you ever walked home at night and noticed something off about your usual route? Maybe a streetlight flickered in a way it never had before, or the shadows seemed a little too long. That's how it all started for me. One flickering light that I couldn't ignore. I've lived in my town my entire life. It's the kind of place where nothing really happens. People live quiet lives, mind their business, and things just keep ticking along. I work a normal 9-to-5 job and live in a small apartment about a 15-minute walk from the office. I've walked that route home hundreds of times without a second thought. But last fall, something changed. It was late September, just as the nights were starting to get cooler. I had stayed at the office late, trying to get a jump on a project, and by the time I finally packed up and headed out, the streets were empty. The walk home was familiar and comforting. The streets were quiet, the air crisp. But as I approached the last stretch of my walk, just before I turned onto my street, I noticed something strange. One of the streetlights ahead was flickering. I know that doesn't sound like much, but I'd walked that route for years, and I'd never seen that streetlight flicker. It was one of those things you just subconsciously notice, how everything stays the same in a small town. So, when something's out of place, it sticks with you. I brushed it off as a faulty bulb. After all, it was just a light. But as I got closer, I realized it wasn't just flickering. It was turning off completely, staying dark for a few seconds, and then coming back on again. And in those moments of darkness, when the street was swallowed by shadows, I felt a strange sense of unease, like something was watching me from the shadows. I quickened my pace, telling myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a light, but when I passed under the flickering glow, something strange happened. The light went out, completely, and didn't come back on. I stood there, frozen, bathed in darkness. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. The street was too quiet, unnaturally so. No distant sounds of traffic, no wind rustling the leaves, just silence. I looked around, trying to shake the feeling, but something was wrong. The air felt thick, like it was pressing down on me, and in that moment I was sure I wasn't alone. I glanced down the street, my eyes straining to adjust to the dark, and that's when I saw it. A figure standing just beyond the reach of the next streetlight. It was too far away to make out any details, but it was tall, its silhouette barely visible in the dim light. My heart skipped a beat. At first I thought it might just be someone else out for a late-night walk, but something about the way they stood, so still, sent a chill down my spine. For a moment, we stood there, both of us unmoving. Then, the streetlight ahead flickered once, twice, and the figure stepped forward. But when the light came back on, they were gone. Just like that. One moment there, the next, nothing. I bolted. I ran the rest of the way home, my breath coming in short gasps, my mind racing. By the time I reached my apartment, I was drenched in sweat, but safe. I locked the door behind me, my heart still pounding in my chest. I stood there for a long time, listening for any sound outside, but the night was quiet again. I told myself I was overreacting. It was late, I was tired, and my mind had played tricks on me. But something about that figure, that flickering light, wouldn't leave me alone. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The next day, I avoided walking home after dark. I made sure to leave the office early, taking a different route entirely. For a few days, everything was fine. Life went on as usual. But that feeling of being watched, it lingered. Then, about a week later, it happened again. I was coming home late after grabbing dinner with some friends, feeling a bit more at ease after a few drinks. As I turned onto my street, I saw it, the same flickering streetlight. My heart sank. But this time, it wasn't just the light. The figure was there again, standing just beyond the light, watching. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. The figure was closer this time, still too far to make out any details, but I could tell it was tall, too tall, with an unnatural stillness about it. And then, just like before, the light went out. In the darkness, I heard something. A soft shuffle, like feet moving across the pavement, and then nothing. When the light flickered back on, the figure was gone. I didn't run this time. I couldn't. My legs felt like lead, my body frozen in place. I just stood there, staring at the empty street, my mind struggling to make sense of what I'd just seen. For days after that, I was jumpy, unable to focus. I started avoiding the area entirely, taking longer routes home, but every night I would find myself thinking about that streetlight, about the figure. What was it, and why did it keep appearing? I started asking around, trying to see if anyone else had noticed anything strange. Most people didn't know what I was talking about, but one guy, an older man who'd lived in the town his whole life, gave me a strange look when I mentioned the flickering streetlight. "You shouldn't walk down that street at night," he said, his voice low. Not after what happened. "What do you mean?" I asked, my curiosity piqued. He hesitated, glancing around as if to make sure no one was listening. "A few years back, there was an accident. A man was hit by a car under that streetlight. They say he was walking home late at night, just like you. The driver never saw him. By the time they found him, it was too late." I felt a chill run down my spine. "So what does that have to do with—" Ever since then, the man interrupted. "People say they've seen things. Figures. Shadows. No one walks down that street at night anymore. Not if they know what's good for them." I didn't know what to make of it. I wasn't one to believe in ghosts, but the way he spoke, the way he looked at me, it unnerved me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, my mind racing, replaying the man's words over and over. Was that what I had seen? The ghost of the man who died under the streetlight? It seemed ridiculous, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure, standing in the dark, watching me. A few nights later, I decided to face it. I couldn't keep living in fear, avoiding that street forever. I needed answers. So, I waited. I left my apartment just before midnight and walked down the familiar route, my heart pounding with every step. The street was empty, the air cool and still. As I approached the flickering streetlight, I felt my stomach tighten with dread. And there it was. The light flickered, and the figure appeared, standing in the same spot as before, just beyond the reach of the light. I stopped, my breath catching in my throat. The figure was closer this time, close enough that I could almost make out its face, but something was wrong. Its proportions were off, its limbs too long. Its proportions were off, its limbs too long, its posture unnatural. The light flickered again, and for a brief moment I saw its face, pale, distorted, eyes wide and empty. The light went out. In the darkness, I heard it move. This time, I didn't wait. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the pavement, my heart racing in my chest. I didn't stop until I reached my apartment, slamming the door behind me, gasping for breath. That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about the figure, about its face, those empty eyes staring back at me. The next morning, I packed a bag and left town. I haven't been back since. It's been months now, but I still think about it. That flickering streetlight, that figure in the dark. Every now and then, I wonder if it was real, or if my mind had just been playing tricks on me. But deep down, I know what I saw. Sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in my new apartment, I'll hear a sound, just a flicker of movement outside the window or the soft shuffle of footsteps on the street below. And I wonder if it found me again.